Hello, my name is Paula Anderson, and I am with Writing by Design Media. And this is going to be another candid conversation with entrepreneurs. And so today we have joining us Jermaine Shorter and Katherine Shorter. They are a married couple and they provide mental health counseling. And so we're going to talk a little about their business model, some of the resources that they provide, and then just some other information about mental health awareness. All right, so how you doing today, Jermaine?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well. All right. So just wanted you guys to just give a brief introduction about what you do, the type of services that you provide, and then we'll go into the conversation.
Okay, cool. So what we do, the name of our business is Inside Out Counseling and Coaching, and we provide mental health services. So I am the mental health counselor uh, of the team. My wife, Catherine, she is the certified pastoral counselor. So she is the coach. So that's why how you get Inside Out counseling and coaching. Part of what we offer is mental health counseling for individuals and couples. Um, 70% of the caseload that I see are couples, and then the other 30% are individuals and sometimes teenagers. Um, Catherine, she offers coaching services through a ministry called Yoked. Yoked is a blog. It's a marriage ministry that helps to um, facilitate growth and covenant marriages through love and laughter. And so there's a blog. There's also a podcast that we co-host together. It's called Yoked. It can be found on all podcast platforms, and also on YouTube. And
Okay.
so, go ahead.
Okay. So let's talk a little about what led you to want to start a ministry that would help married couples. So, what were you seeing in your own professional experiences that you felt the need to start something like this?
Well, oddly enough, our desire to start doing marriage counseling and to help serve marriages came way before the counseling aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Before we entered into our own marriage, we put a lot of intentional work into making sure that the union that we were going into had the strongest foundation possible. And while it was a little difficult for us to, be that vulnerable with each other and talk about our fears and our hopes and desires and the things that we wanted out of a marriage, we realized that it really helped to grow our marriage before we even started. And we, chose the wise counsel of married couples around us, for guidance. And through that effort, we decided that, it was too serious of an issue to go into marriage without the proper foundation. So we started the Yoked Ministry to help people be intentional as they walked into marriage, to make sure that they were walking into it with their eyes wide open. Years after we started that ministry, Jermaine went through a work transition and started re-examining his purpose and what he wanted to do and what he should be doing with his life, which is how he ended up going into counseling. And when he made that decision to become a mental health counselor, I followed behind him and pursued a master's level certification so that when I worked with him and supported him in his efforts, I was coming from a place of education and research and not just giving my opinion on what I think people should do to, improve their marriages or improve their relationships. So we wanted to make sure that we were both coming from a place of not only our heart being in it, but having the educational and clinical background to really be able to support the couples that we work with.
Okay, how open have couples been towards receiving counseling or just getting that enrichment to grow their marriage? And I know sometimes women are more open to receiving counseling than men. So how has that dynamic worked within your with what you're doing?
Couples have been fairly open to it. But it's something that definitely needs to improve and something that needs to grow. Generally, when I do see a couple, um, the the female is a little more open in the beginning, but halfway through the first session, the male is I've worked on rapport building with the male enough that he also starts to open up as well. And I'm at least from feedback I've received, I'm not biased toward one side or the other.
Yeah.
I'm very fair in how I interpret each person's perspective during our counseling sessions.
And I'd want to add to that, I think that it's a stereotype that we are kind of breaking down, because people assume that Black men don't want counseling, that they don't need help. But I think what we found since Jermaine has gone into private practice and we've opened up this agency together is that Black men especially have just been looking for a safe space to be able to, to share their problems and to seek help. And because he is one of, very few Black male counselors in the Memphis and Mid-South area, Black men have intentionally sought him out because they are, able to talk to someone who not only understands, their struggles and the things that they are having to deal with, but they trust him because they're receiving feedback from someone who looks like them and who can relate to them and who is not going to, harm them in their path for recovery and healing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot of Black males are really just looking for a place where they can be heard and understood without rejection or being judged or feeling as though they're just going to be their feelings and interpretation of life is going to be dismissed or diminished as them being a weak man.
Okay. So you're saying that you counsel men individually, or you're talking about in a marital situation?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges that you hear from men when they actually do come to see you?
The biggest challenge I hear is that people or my wife doesn't understand. They think that I'm just complaining or just being a weak man when really I do feel these things or I do experience these things or I have experienced trauma in my childhood that manifests itself in ways that is destructive or unhealthy for my relationships, particularly my relationship with my spouse or my children or at work. And so people, honestly, Black men just they just have a struggle with people accepting their experience as something that is real and genuine.
Okay. And so, do you guys experience couples who, when they came to you, they were on the brink of, not, well, maybe get a divorce, and so the counseling that you provided was able to help them to see their marriage in a different way, and they turned around? So, do you have any of those situations that occur?
Yeah, that happens all the time. Unfortunately, couples tend to wait a little too late sometimes to come. They come literally, right before they're getting ready to, sign divorce papers. But in those situations that is too late. We have had some situations where couples come and they're separated and they're seeking legal counsel, but we're able to help them turn that around and actually help them to see the other person's point of view and work together for the common good of the relationship.
Yes, and I think I would like to add, the rate of a couple staying together or separating is not so much on the counselor, because when couples come to us, they are recognizing that they need help, or they know that this is the last ditch effort and they're trying to do everything that they can to save their marriages. But it is more dependent upon the two people in the relationship, because as long as they both want to work it out, it's much easier for the counselor to facilitate that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're coming into counseling with the mindset that I'm just doing this to go through the motions, then you're not really giving your marriage a chance in the first place. And there's not a whole lot that counseling can do to help save that. So for as much as we are, honored to be able to help couples, get back on the right track. It's really up to them whether or not they want this to work.
Right.
Okay, so what are some of the preventative measures that couples need to take so that when they, it's not the last, you know, uh, it's too late. So what can they be doing? I guess, once they get married. So what are some things to do?
Wow, that's a good question, and it's a very loaded one. There's a lot of things that couples can do, but just in my experience, choose not to. And so just at the little things that the things that they think are little and small, and think that oh, it's just time. I just got to give them some time, give them a day or two, and they'll get over it. People just don't get over things.
Mm,
People don't just forget and ignore things, especially when you made them feel a certain way. People don't forget how you made them feel, and so while you may move past that in the beginning, your fiery lust in the beginning of the marriage may get you past that moment. Physically, emotionally, you're not past that moment. You're still stuck there, and it's going to come up again. So you should not ignore those little things. You have to be in a position to where you can talk about those things in a way that is constructive and healthy.
okay.
Uh,
I'm sorry. Did you want to say something, Catherine?
No, I'm not going to add anything to that right now. He pretty much summed it up.
Okay, so there have been several books that I've read about marriage, and then of course about being single. And so one of the books is the Five Love Languages, and
Mhm.
so in that book, of course, it talks about how to communicate love to your partner, and it may not be the exact same language that you communicate to the other partner. So have you used that book as a foundation for helping couples, and just what are your thoughts about communicating love to your partner?
Yes, we have used that book. It is one of our foundational books. It is one of those easily overlooked things as far as how you love your spouse and how you show love to your spouse and how your spouse receives love. It's very easy for me to get caught up in the way that I show love versus the way my spouse receives love. And one of the things we try to teach couples to do is you have to be able to stretch yourself and challenge yourself to say, hey, this may not be how I express love, but this is how my partner receives love. And so these are the ways I need to show love to my spouse and still continue to show your spouse love in the way that you normally do.
Yeah.
Okay. And so for couples, and I guess for singles, I should say, for singles who want to get married and they're in that state of waiting and kind of getting frustrated. So what is some advice that you would give to singles about marriage not being like the end all and be all to make you happy?
um, I it's really hard to be in that season of life when you want to be married more than anything. And for me, I was 33 when we got married. And by the time I had met him, I had, given up on marriage and just knew that this was not for me. And I needed to focus on myself. And through those years, having terrible, terrible relationships prior to him, through those years, I really learned to refocus because one of the hardest things to realize is that once you get into marriage, I think a lot of people give themselves over completely to the marriage and they start to lose their identity when they get into marriage, women especially. And to understand, it's much easier to live in your truth and your purpose if you've identified that before you get married than when you get married and trying to figure out like, who am I now? Because even though we are in a union together, I'm still an individual. I still have my own purpose in this world, and I need to live in that truth, no matter what my marital status. So for singles, I always encourage them to really get to know themselves. And because, we are Christian focused, I always encourage them to really develop their personal relationship with Christ and really understand who they are in this world. Because I think too many times we conform to the other person in hopes of that being good enough for them to marry us. And then once we get married, we're no longer who we truly are. And that's one of those small things that can fester over time in a marriage when you're walking through marriage and you're not walking in your own identity.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it causes friction down the road because you're fighting with, I'm a wife, but I'm also this person, but my spouse does not know who I really am. And I don't have the space to be who I truly am.
Yeah. And I think it's also good for people to, like you said, get to know who you are, but in a very tangible way. So not just your likes and dislikes, but what is your personality type? What is your parenting style? You don't have to be a parent in order to read a book or take an assessment and understand what your parenting style is. Understand what your work style is. What is your work ethic? Are you, when it comes to work, are you a type A personality? Are you more of a person that prefers teams over individual work? Or and also, there's an assessment called a Big Five personality type. Which one is that? The more you know about yourself, the more you can tell the other person that you're in this relationship about yourself, rather than having to guess.
Yeah. And
Okay.
then
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would say not just personality, like there's so many different aspects of what makes up an individual. You should be discussing, financial styles. Like, are you a saver? Is he a spender? If you have different financial goals in life, that's something that could cause conflict in a relationship. Looking at familial history and family dynamics, because like he said, talking about your parenting style, depending on the relationship, if as a man you have a strained relationship with your mother, how is that going to affect how you interact with and respect your wife? All of these different things go into who you are and who you will be in a marriage, and those are things that you should really be evaluating and examining before you ever get married.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the issues that a lot of us have, is that we think that the marriage is going to complete our identity and who we are, but we actually have to be a whole and complete person before we walk down the aisle. And so, so when you're speaking to couples about that process, do you find that most of your clients have gone through that process before they get married, or just once they're
No.
in, they're just in?
Yeah,
No.
a lot of couples end up getting married, and when we ask them why are you getting married, and it's always because somehow love is in there. Not to say love isn't a good reason, but it can't be the only reason.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the podcast Yoked. So tell us what kind of content we can hear on that, and just how long you've been doing that, and how people can access that.
So we started the Yoke podcast in August of last year, and to this point, no topic has been off the table. We've addressed, everything from we talked early on about me being exposed to sexuality at a very young age and how that shaped me, in my formative years, and how that is reflected in, who I am as a grown woman. And we've talked about, we just did an episode talking about infidelity with one of my friends who um, committed infidelity in her marriage, but talking about how infidelity is not just sexual intercourse, all of the different things that are covered under the umbrella of infidelity and how you can guard your marriage against it. We talked about how traveling enriches relationships and how it can be used to strengthen couples. And we're starting a new series called Yoke Behind Closed Doors, where we're talking about sexuality within Christian marriages, because we see a lot of situations where people have different sexual styles because they've been taught for so long that because you're a Christian you can't enjoy sex, and that how that leads to a lot of strain in marriages because you're not able to fully enjoy the sexual aspect of being married, and breaking those stereotypes and things down. So anything that affects a marriage or affects you and your ability to be in a healthy marriage is what we cover on that podcast.
Hello?
I'm sorry, tell us about your YouTube channel.
Oh.
So the YouTube channel, when we record our podcast, we recorded the video and the audio. So for those who prefer video, a lot of our podcast episodes, well, all of our podcast episodes go onto the YouTube channel. But beyond the podcast, we also do different, motivational videos, different, marriage enrichment videos. And just, I don't know. Oh yes, and we've been tracing our roots through the African ancestry program. So we're talking about our African ancestry and how knowing where we came from affects where we're going to go in life.
Okay. All right. So, are there any last words that you would like to share with our viewers about your counseling services and how they can reach you and contact you?
No.
So I will say that while I understand that people may think a certain way about mental health counseling, thinking that there has to be something wrong, or you're crazy if you go to that means you're crazy if you go see a mental health counselor. I just want to say that is not true. There are a lot of very healthy and successful people that come to see me. People don't come and see me because there's necessarily something wrong. A lot of times people come just for a check-in. I've had a couple clients that just come just because they want someone who is not a part of their immediate circle, friend or family, to talk with, to bounce ideas off with, and to be a sounding board. So it's not because there's always something wrong. I say it's kind of like your car. You don't take your car to get it worked on just because there's something wrong. A lot of times it's just for maintenance and to keep things running as they should.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been an edition of Candid Conversations. So this video is going to be posted on our YouTube channel. July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, and so we're going to feature this video on our channel for that. So thank you so much for joining us, and you guys have a great day.
Thank you. Okay, Paula?
Yeah.
Do we need to send you like all of the links for where to find?
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Stop.